Thank you. Mr. President, board directors, Dr. Fagan, and members of the community, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Master Capital Plan. As some of you know, I'm a recent member of the team, and I come from private healthcare before. And one of the things that occurred to me are the similarities that exist between healthcare and public education, and also some very strong differences between the two. The first difference is that coming from healthcare organizations, and I have always worked for nonprofit healthcare organizations, is that we can generate revenue. And so when we see a need for capital investment, we generate it. And we have control over that process. The biggest difference in public education is that we don't have that luxury. We have to count on the grace and the goodwill of our community to make that happen. The second biggest difference is that when we identify a community that has a need for medical services, we can make a decision on how to deploy our hospitals, building one or building a series of clinics, but that is a decision that we only make when we have the capital resources to engage that. So we have, again, in private healthcare, the luxury of being able to pull back and wait for the right time. The biggest difference in public education is that when the need is there, you have to engage. There's no other choice. And so even when the capital resourcing isn't there for maintenance or for investment, you still have to do your job. As I was thinking about this, I thought about the good old yesteryears, and much of this is me learning about what a school district is like. So I would imagine that, and I know that in the past when bonds were successful, that the practice for most school districts is to really look at thoughtfully the useful life of our facilities. So whether we're talking about a roof or a boiler or buses or security cameras, what we're really looking at is what's the useful life and where are we relative to that useful life. And in the past, when we had the adequate resourcing to attack and address these issues, we would go about it by looking at a building, for instance, that had 15 years in terms of its age, and go, all right, this is the appropriate time to substitute and replace that piece of the building. And that's preventive health, basically. What we have today, though, is something entirely different. Our bond funds are gone, and we're now working with a zero-sum amount of resourcing for the things that we need to do to keep buildings open. A few weeks ago, I went to Mammoth Heights to meet with some teachers for a project that Rich and I were working on. And as I introduced myself to one of the teachers, she said, Chief Operating Officer, what does that mean exactly? And I said, half jokingly, half seriously, I keep the buildings running so that you have a great environment to teach and to encourage learning. So part of that is an issue that recently at a retreat with most of my team, I said, look, guys, you're not in the glamorous part of the district, and you're going to have to be understanding of that. Part of my job is to make you more glamorous. But a lot of that is about how do we get out into the community to talk about the values of what we do to contribute equally to the learning environment. So there's a thing that we're doing now, which I think should be troubling to everybody in the community, which is that we're approaching how we look at roofs today differently than how we looked at it yesterday. So now we look at a 15-year-old roof, and our concern and our ability is not, can we replace the entire thing? It's where is the most likely area of the roof that is going to suffer a catastrophic failure? And my suggestion is that we don't do this in our personal lives. If you were looking at your own house with a 15-year-old roof, I doubt that any of us would be very comfortable or satisfied with just trying to address that piecemeal. And yet, for some reason, when it's a public asset, we somehow lack the urgency on that. The same thing with our boilers. We don't attack the entire mechanical system anymore, even as it ends towards its useful life. We try to address individual boilers that are most likely to fail. And that's not a great environment for us to create. And buses. I wonder how many of us know that 50% of our buses at this point, approximately, are about 15 years old, and 20% of our buses are near the 20-year-old mark. And does somebody want to guess what the national industry standard is for useful life for buses? It's 20. So 50% of our buses are 5 years gapped from useful life, and then we have an additional number of 20% that's already past useful life. And this is what I mean by me professing that I don't always entirely understand human behavior, because this seems urgent to me. And the way that I put it to you is, last year I had an opportunity to do something stupid. I went to a bungee cord jumping event, and I was thinking about this today. I thought, what if I asked a scary question of the instructor? What's the useful life of a bungee cord? And what if the answer was 1,000 jumps? And what if the instructor further said to me, by the way, we just hit 1,000 yesterday? It's very unlikely, though, that something is going to happen to you. What are the chances? But that's precisely part of my concern, is that we've hit that useful life. And so our concern really needs to be, what's the real risk? And I wouldn't be comfortable making that jump. I certainly, as the father of an 8-year-old in the district, would not be comfortable asking him to make that jump. So now that I've talked about all the things that are different between healthcare and public education, let me talk about something that actually is similar. So whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, if any of you recall the last presidential debate, something rarer than a unicorn happened, which is the two candidates agreed on one thing. And that one thing was both candidates, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, agreed that the two leading organizations in healthcare working on population management and preventive health were the Mayo Clinic and Intermountain Healthcare of Salt Lake. And the reason that they were widely applauded by both parties and by both candidates is because they have gotten to the point of understanding that preventive health is more important than reactive health. And the fact of the matter is, that's the similarity, is that the reason that I put ERs up there is that the average contact cost of you touching an ER in the United States is $2,168. The average cost of you going to a primary care physician for preventive health is $158. So that's the difference that we're trying to impart in terms of importance of what we need to do in terms of our facilities. So tomorrow, I have listed, I honestly don't have anything to say about tomorrow other than that it's really within the hands of this community. The commitment from my operational team is we will get out there as often as we can, talk to as many forums and as many groups as we can, give high integrity answers based on the facts, and then my hope is that if everybody brings the same intensity of passion, but also the same intensity of rationality, that we will get to the right results as a community. So let me introduce Rich Cosgrove. His team has done a yeoman's job of putting these together every year. I also wanted to acknowledge Todd Warnke and the 22 members of the Long Range Planning Committee, volunteers who have done a phenomenal job in putting these together. Thank you.
Good evening. With 80 schools and with over 6.6 million square feet, we have a significant inventory, and the need to reinvest in our facilities every year increases annually as the buildings continue to age. This slide summarizes our current unfunded capital needs, basically to support our strategic plan, namely to provide a safe and healthy learning environment and to provide an environment for 21st century learning. These are the minimum unfunded capital needs right now to continue operations. It's a living document, and in fact, since the recent board retreat in February, these numbers have increased. Since last year, the capital renewal needs, and I'm not counting transportation, security, or new construction, but just the capital maintenance needs have increased by $35 million. That's for two reasons. Number one, the unfunded requirements we had from last year have increased by inflation, and conditions have continued to worsen, and every year we assess any school that has reached its 15-year point since it was last maintained of significance. So for example, this past year, we added all the schools that opened in 2002. We're also updating our charter school capital requirements. In particular, we have issues that could interrupt the educational program. That includes certain key mechanical systems like boilers, chillers, electrical systems like switches and transformers, roofs, and moisture protection. We have life safety, particularly fire alarm system upgrades and replacements, security infrastructure and equipment, camera replacements, new cameras, wiring, servers. We have over 2,000 security radios in the district that either need to be maintained or replaced. We have other facility reinvestment needs. That's your carpet. And it's not just for appearance, it's indoor air quality, it's tripping, it's fraying, it's safety for the small kids. It's artificial fields and tracks. Typically for a high school with organized sports, we have to replace an artificial field every 11 years. At some point, it'll become unsafe because it has no more bounce test and it can't maintain the rubber. So it's not just appearance, but it's for safety. We have parking lots that need to be mill and overlaid. Those are some of the examples in that piece of the pie. We have technology. That's for computer hardware, software rotation, servers, wireless access points in our schools. Transportation. As Thomas Tsai mentioned, we have a significant bus fleet and support vehicle fleet. Over 300 buses, almost 150 support vehicles. On average, it costs $100,000 for a new bus. Right now, we're funding $500,000 a year for 4 or 5 buses a year. We need 50 buses just in the next 2 years to get to the point where we need to be. We do have some new construction here, and I'll show that in the next slide with respect to our enrollment projections. We have an addition to Casaview High School. Casaview High School is the only high school of the new prototype that does not have what we call the F-pod. So the program capacity for that school is 500 less than any other high school. Also, we add 2 to 3 preschool rooms a year across the district. We've been adding those in our elementary schools. So we put them in our elementary schools, and as a result, we take offline a typical classroom for capacity. We're mandated to support special education preschool, so up to 49% of a preschool room can be special education, 51% is tuition-based, so that's how we mix it. And right now, we've been adding 2 to 3 a year across the district, so as a result, we have early childhood centers in the plan. 1 in Highlands Ranch, 1 in Parker, and a 3-classroom addition to the to the Castle Rock Early Childhood Center. We also have a special education K-8 school, which you were briefed during the board retreat, in this plan to better support and reintegrate special education students across the district. This slide shows our enrollment projections over the next 5 years. These are the numbers we're tracking for capacity reasons, kids in seats. So this does not include homeschool and online schools. Our global projections are relatively flat if we had this in one column. So we wanted to break it out because the 3 different graphs are very telling. For the elementary schools, we're showing an overall decline in the next 5 years. And by the way, this includes our charter schools. This is because over the past 5 years, across the county, birth rates have declined, and in 2008, residential development virtually halted. When a residential development is built out, there's typically a 5 to 8 year lag between the build out of that planned development and when kids enter the district. So we're still in that lag. We're in that trough at the elementary school level. But those large class sizes are hitting the middle school level. They'll peak out in the middle of the 5 year period. And in particular, we'll still have around 1,400 kids at Rocky Heights Middle School and Cimarron Middle School. And in the next 5 years, those large class sizes will be migrating to the high schools. And in particular, we'll have several of our high schools at capacity. One is Casaview High School. That's our worst need, and that's why we have an addition in the plan. Chaparral High School will have 2,600 kids. Legend, Mountain Vista, and Rock Canyon will also be near capacity, as well as Mountain Vista. We can address these capacity issues with mobile classrooms. That's the plan right now. But in the next 5 to 6 years, as we update our master capital plan next year, these numbers could change and we could bring to you a need for capacity at the high school level. Also, I want to point out that since 2011, residential development has been booming. These numbers don't show that yet because of that lag. So we really believe in the next 5 to 10 years, there will be significant growth needed at all levels. And case in point, if we look out till 2040, with all the approved plan development through the county and the municipalities and the plan development that has been submitted but not yet approved, we project we'll have 18 feeders, 118,000 kids, and in particular, just 2 examples. So Sterling Ranch in the northwest portion of the county. That's already been approved. It's 12,000 homes, 35,000 people, 9,500 kids. So that's 7 elementaries, 1 middle, and 1 high school just in that feeder. In Parker, Anthology has 6,000 homes, 4 elementaries, 1 middle, 1 high. So someday, probably pretty soon, that's going to hit us. Right now, it's not. And so we're at a fortunate time, an opportune time, to focus on our deferred maintenance needs. These images reflect about 1/3 of our elementary schools, depending on the building component shown, and about 40% of our students attend schools that have maintenance issues like these. And if I can, just walk you through. For example, the upper left is a typical parking lot. It looks just like a crack, but with over 300 freeze-thaw cycles a year, when water infiltrates that and freezes and drains, you get potholes, you get differential settlement, and in some cases we have schools where the foundation's been compromised. For those tennis courts, we typically have a $30,000 overlay about every 3 years in our tennis courts, and we try to do 3 high schools a year, 2 to 3, and that simply, it gets us 3 more years of life. It really needs to be milled and overlaid. And the restrooms on the lower right, that's Sierra Middle School, and that's original 1975 caulk and tile and toilet partitions. We have many schools with restrooms that old. Northeast Elementary boiler, it's 1966. At some point it's going to fail. We have exterior cracks as a result of some settlement and just age in our buildings that we need to address. That's the play field at Northeast Elementary, and that's some exterior doors at Larkspur Elementary. Water infiltrates, you get water damage inside, you get mold, you get indoor air quality issues. So these are the issues now, but I do want to reiterate, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have significant costs with growth. With the cost of elementary, middle, and high schools, those are big costs. Sooner or later, we're going to need a new 4th bus terminal, because our bus terminals are at the capacity for bus parking slots and support staff amenities. And if mandated all-day kindergarten is passed, then we'll need to provide 35 additional classrooms. That in and of itself is just on the order of about $10 million in today's dollars. So these are significant needs, but again, we have an opportunity now because we're not faced with the growth that we will be in the near future. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Bonnie and her team to discuss a financing strategy.
Thank you, Rich. Good evening. So I wanted to talk about the financing options that we've actually used since 2011. So in 2011, we requested bond dollars to the tune of about $200 million. We wanted to ask the taxpayer what we needed. And I can't remember if Rich said this or not, but every year in which we go without addressing some of our ongoing facility reinvestment needs, we are looking at a $35 million per year increase. So $200 million back in 2011 was requested. 4 years later, that's roughly another $300 million? No, whatever, 30 times. Maybe another 100 million, about another 100 million. So right now we're asking for 275 million. So we have done some work to eliminate the ongoing needs or to mitigate some of our stress areas through the last 4 years. So one of those things has been the general fund transfer into the capital projects fund. So over the last couple of years, as I've presented budgets and the financial report at the end of the year, we've indicated to you that any unspent contingency dollars we've moved over to capital to address some ongoing capital needs. Energy performance contracting, so we are now engaged in 2 separate energy performance contracts in which we are able to borrow money now to address energy needs. We've done Douglas County High School. We're working on Thunder Ridge now, I think, as well as Wilcox. Those are expected to generate enough energy savings to be able to pay those lease payments into the next 10 years. The third item was the certificates of participation. If you remember, back in 2011, probably the spring of 2012, we engaged in a process by which we created a certificates of participation policy, trying to figure out a way in which maybe we could leverage relationships with our charter schools to be able to build classrooms that are in needed areas, such as Castle Rock and Parker. In return for that, we would take out a certificate of participation on behalf of the charter school, but they would actually make the lease payments. So that was a win-win for us. We were successful doing that with Aspen View. We also were successful with American Academy, though we were not able to provide capital funding for them. We were able to designate one of our school sites to their second site in Parker. Cash in lieu revenues, we do regularly see these. These revenues were absolutely flat in 2010, 11, and 12, primarily due to the economic situation at the time. Without development going on, there were very few revenues. We've actually seen an uptick in that this current year. We have over $2 million in the current year reflected, but those revenues go up and down, and you can't necessarily count on those. The final option for us to mitigate some of these needs are general obligation bonds. So all of these things are basically what I just said. They're just in more detail. So this is really the gist of the conversation today regarding how we're going to meet that $275 million ongoing need, as well as needs well into the future. So as we were working with our bond underwriters, we asked them, could you please develop a model in which we could keep our tax levy for an average home flat for a long period of time to take advantage of natural decreases in debt service requirement that we are going to be seeing in the next 2 years. So if you look right now, our debt service requirement yearly is just under $70 million, and that's in 2015. In 2016, 17, you'll see that we have a significant drop of about $13 million. So at that point, it would be analogous to you going out and getting to refinancing your mortgage in your home. So you've got low interest rates, you have enough equity in your house, you have an opportunity in the market where you're going to say, hey, I need to put some more money back into my house. I'm going to go ahead and refinance my mortgage, take out the cash so I can do those ongoing improvements. That's what's happening in that 2016-2017 timeframe. We did this based upon an average home. We actually grew the average home based upon an inflation rate. We assumed 1% in the non-assessment years, 3% in a reassessment year. And even considering that, we still were able to, with this model, keep the actual dollar value of the tax levy the same, which means the tax rate actually still goes down because your assessed value is still expected to grow. The beauty about this particular model is it takes us out almost 15 to 20 years out, being able to, every 4 to 5 years, go and ask for additional resources, again with the idea that we would keep the dollar amount flat. The assessed value continues to grow. The tax rate continues to go down, keeping the dollar value flat. So this is a great opportunity for us to ask for the additional resources from the taxpayer with a zero impact on what they're paying today. However, if you look at this chart here, you can see that with this model, we're expecting these dollar amounts to remain the same. So it is dropping a little bit. We didn't go out too much further than this. But the point here is if we didn't do this, the tax amount would drop for an average home. So we are looking at a tax increase because if we weren't successful and didn't go out for a bond election, then our taxpayers would see a decrease in their taxes, not keeping it the same. So this is an opportunity for us to request that the taxpayers of Douglas County have an opportunity to help us maintain our $900 million worth of facilities. in a manner that will, without having a huge impact on our taxpayer. So that's all I have.